Radio 1 on 247 metres and VHF with sounds of the 70s.
Radio 1!
Tonight, Bob Harris.
Musically, tonight's programme promises to be a very fine one indeed. We've got new sessions from Tapestry and Steelers Wheel, and a repeat of the session from Joni Mitchell, taken from her BBC Two in concert programme. The band, in fact, hail from Cheltenham, and I first saw them about 3 or 4 months ago when they were working in Portsmouth. They've not done any tours of America, and they're not, in fact, recording either at the moment, but I'm sure it won't be very long. As you know, the first broadcast from them came on the Monday programme, getting on now for pretty well a year ago. I don't think it's quite as long as that, but probably about 9 months or so. We had another session from them following that too, and then I did a concert programme with them, and still they're not recording, and I just can't understand why it is. They make such beautiful music, and this is the first from them. It's one of Angie's songs too, and it's called Betrothal.
At 6 years old, I was betrothed to my father's chosen man, a wealthy squire's son. At 20 years, I met today my father's chosen man, a wealthy squire. Now we must marry at noon.
Tapestry was formed in May 1970 from 3 members of a loud rock band and a gentle singer-songwriter. 2 months later, they had their first performance at the Everyman Theatre in Cheltenham, and it was reviewed by the local press. Brighter than Technicolor, coupling violent sound assaults with a sweet and wistful lyricism. But Tapestry was never a rock band, nor was it a folk band. They were attempting to create something different to mark their own musical identity.
To my mother.
During a visit to a trade show in August 1970 to assess portable keyboards, Angie met the owner of a studio where Tapestry later recorded 3 demos. She also purchased a Hohner clavinet, which gave the band a new instrumental texture. The band auditioned for a forthcoming arts programme being made by HTV Bristol. One of their songs was chosen for incidental music for a documentary about an 18th century Bristol poet. His name was Thomas Chatterton. The programme was Paint Me an Angel. The song was C-Suite. Now with the clavinet, the band had sort of inadvertently sort of fallen between 2 musical genres. They were too loud for folk clubs, really. I mean, mind you, they might have been that already, but they weren't rocky enough for some of the sort of the clubs where Pete, Herbie and Chris had been playing. So they decided they needed some help, and they sought a manager and auditioned for John Viger.
Well, Tapestry was a very important band to me at one time. Going back now, probably well over 40 years. If we were to travel back to 1970, somewhere around the end of the summer, going into the winter of 1970, that was my first connection with the band. I just thought, well, this band has great potential. It was a very interesting lineup. It had Angie Britton, keyboards, mainly keyboards, and singing. And she had a lovely voice, very mellow, and she brought a melodic sort of aspect to the band, which was largely made up of guys that had been in heavy bands, you know, for example, Chris Chandler, the guitarist, and Pete Stone, the bass player. They were really from, their previous bands were heavy bands. They also had a very interesting member of the band. The fourth member of the band was Herbie, and he was interesting because not only did he play drums, but he also played flute, which was quite unusual. And he played really well as well. The music was the thing for me. Around that time, there was, psychedelia, if you like. There were heavy bands, heavy rock bands, classic rock bands, prog rock bands, electric folk bands. And here was Tapestry, which was a little bit like a bit of all of those. And for me, the quality of their writing and their music was really, really good, and the potential to make a splendid album.
Pete, Herbie and Chris slipping comfortably back into a style of playing that had been theirs for many years before Tapestry. And it was also part of the reason where the four musicians come together in the first place. It was to sort of explore these sort of combinations of light and dark. John picked up on the fact that having a drummer who played flute was a strange combination. But Herbie was a drummer by default, perhaps, because Chris and Herbie had been playing together for many years. And when they started their first band, Herbie's brother was a drummer, so Herbie had access to drum kits, so Herbie became the drummer. Chris knew a couple of chords, he became the guitarist, and that's how it all worked. During this same period, Pete had formed a band called Pastel Shade as the bass player, and it was here that he first met Angie Britton when they were playing one of the local gigs. From there, he moved on, still as a bass player, to a band called Bread, where they worked with the legendary producers Simon Napier Bell and were tipped for stardom. Unfortunately, Pete had a long period of vertigo and had to leave the band. Sometimes life is just a series of lucky events, and in the summer of '71, Angie was contacted by a company called EMS who produced the VCS3 synthesizer, and they wanted to know if Tapestry would road test this for them. I suppose it was in competition for against Moog, and also they thought Tapestry was an up-and-coming band. I mean, then the only people who had these were sort of Roxy Music, Hawkwind, Curved Air. There's probably a few more, but basically they were a bit special.
The agency started to get them into different types of venues, and you've got to bear in mind, that we built all sorts of venues, and some of the venues were not the best places for Tapestry, but it was very good for their learning, if you like. By the time that the band got to London, they were playing venues like the Marquee Club and so on, and they were attracting a lot of interest from record labels. I'd managed to get lots of different people down to their London gigs, and one person in particular who was very struck, with the band was Bob Harris.
Hello, this is Bob Harris welcoming you to one of the BBC's weekly concerts from London, and today we feature Tapestry.
And he had an incredible following, particularly in the college and university circuits amongst the students, alongside people like John Peel, who, both John and Bob, they were the people, to listen to, in terms of their programs, their material. And of course Bob, I remember him saying, that Tapestry's got to be one of his favourite bands. Although I was in the business of getting record deals, nothing really matured until I met a guy called Noel Walker.
During autumn of 1971, the band were working on more complex arrangements and required greater instrumental and vocal flexibility. Then there were no affordable drum machines or MIDI capabilities, so it was decided to bring in 2 extra members into the band. These were Trevor Davis, who was a singer, but he could play guitar, he could play a bit of keyboards, and Bob Critchley, who was a drummer who also could sing. And this added to the band's flexibility and instrumental dynamics.
I can see the mistakes I have made. You can't put them right. It's a fact that our lives are the power of your mind. You foretold all the changes in me. I followed them through.
And Noel was, not only was he entrepreneurial, but he was also a record producer. And I thought that having him involved would help secure a record deal for Tapestry. And Noel also saw the potential in Tapestry. And not only that, but he was aware that there was quite a buzz, coming up in the music business, because Tapestry was started to do lots of, very, very good gigs. Like a lot of bands, the stamina to keep going and to actually clinch those very important deals where they can have a successful career. It's so hard, for any band even today to make it by, say. One day I get a call, but I remember the dulcet tones of Chris Chandler saying, "Hey John, are you the guy that used to manage us?" And everything came flashing back, came flooding back. I recognised his voice, it was him, and we were pleased actually, because I was pleased that he'd found me, and in a way that I'd found the band again, and now they're trying to put together this video, so that Tapestry, which was a band of the 70s, and if you were to talk to Bob Harris, I'm sure he would agree.
One of the advantages of being older is that you actually have time to do things. And Peter had been digging around on the internet and been looking up John Viger. And we found a John Viger who was running a studio in Norfolk. We thought, this sounds like the guy. Let's see if it was. A phone call later, and it was. And we were so pleased. I mean, like John said, we're just, overjoyed. Terrific.